Crime and how police deal with it is one of the year's hotly debated subjects. Tonight, police are claiming that we're undoubtedly safer than a decade ago. That's because the latest stats show that overall crime is down more than 8%, and that's the biggest drop since 1970. Violent crime, including murder and sex attacks, down, with police solving around 80% of that. But in the area where most people are affected, the figures don't look so rosy. If you've been burgled, police have just a 17% success rate. If your car is stolen, police will catch just a fifth of the crims. While if stuff's taken from your car, well, it's really gone. Just 7% of those cases will be solved. So is it a case of police resourcing the worst crimes, or the public getting a raw deal in the areas where people are most hit? Assistant Commissioner Howard Broad's in Wellington. New Zealand First MP Ron Marks at the Beehive, and in Christchurch, criminologist Greg Newbold joins us. Good evening to you, gentlemen.
Good evening, Susan.
Good evening.
Assistant Commissioner, if I can start with you. I mean, the public perception would be that crime is up. The stats say it's down. Why the disparity?
Well, I think that people's perception is formed by two things. One is what they see outside the front door of their house, and the other thing is what they read and see on television and other media. I just make one point, is that those crimes that you say where there is a low resolution rate, they are difficult crimes to solve, given that they're usually committed sometime in the past, and we have to mount an investigation. We have brought down the number of those crimes by targeting hotspots, by using our intelligence services, and actually reducing the number of victims. That, we think, is far more important than necessarily achieving really high clearance rates, desirable as though they may be.
Ron Mark, these are good-looking numbers. You should be congratulating the police.
Well, the police are doing a pretty good job with the resources that this government's given them, which is totally inadequate. But I have to say this, you know, the thing about statistics is it's statistics, damn statistics, or lies, damn lies and statistics. But I guess what we have to go on is what the public is saying, and the feeling that they have as to whether they're being served well by this government's policies. And the police are under huge pressure to produce outcomes that are determined by the government, that are ring-fenced by the government, and where focuses are determined by the government.
Are you saying they're massaging these numbers?
Well, there was evidence in the Christchurch Press last week that showed that you can now have a case resolved without interviewing the suspect, without charging or convicting him. Most people struggle to come to understand that. And then there are cases, one brought to my attention, where I am told it's possible for as many as 13 charges that involve a burglary to be lumped together and only produced as the actual two offences, which would distort statistics.
I'm going to bring Greg Newbold in a minute, but I just need to come back to the Assistant Commissioner with that, the reliability of these stats. And indeed, it is your National Statistics Manager quoted in a paper saying that crime could be resolved without an offender being even spoken to, let alone arrested. I mean, what does resolved mean?
Well, it means that if the offender has been identified, and we use common sense tests as to whether or not an offender has been identified. Now, in some of those some of those examples that have been given, clearly that's not been resolved according to policy. But there are occasions where, for example, we get forensic identifications that clearly show that the person we've identified must have been the offender. We think it's acceptable to note the file as having been cleared at that point.
So you don't care if they're not convicted?
Well, the conviction's a completely different stage in the criminal justice process. We're concerned about whether we've identified the offender. That's the results of police work. You see, the fact
I want to bring Greg Newbold in here. Yep.
What sometimes happens, particularly with burglary statistics, they'll catch a guy for a couple of burglaries, and they'll say, look, we want to clear the slate. We're only in charge with these 3 burglaries, but can you nod the head to these other 50, because we really want to just clear these. And especially if he's a young guy and he's not thinking ahead, he'll go, oh yeah, okay, and he'll nod to all of them, even some that he hasn't done, and I've spoken to guys who've done that. So there is a little bit of artificiality where these some clearance statistics are concerned, particularly with crimes like burglaries and theft.
The point, though, Greg, would be that we have been adopting these policies for the full life of the computer system that collects figures. So So this, if there are these sorts of interpretations, they are interpretations over a long period of time, and year on year we're collecting things similarly. So the results can be relied on from that perspective.
Why would an officer say that they are receiving instructions where a burglary takes place, and from that house a car is stolen, and from that a wallet is stolen, and an ATM card is used 10 different times, creating something like 13 offences? Why would officers say that they've been required to record only 2 offences? If that is not happening.
If you have evidence that a senior officer is telling someone in the police to record the offences in that way, then I want to know about it, because that's not what we would say was the procedure.
Greg Newbold,
we're talking about two different things, you know. We're talking about, on one hand, clearance rates, and on the other hand, reported crime. The thing with reported crime is that reported crime generally has been declining since the early to mid-1990s, and that's largely because you know, 60% of all reported crime is property crime, so if property crime goes down, the overall crime rates go down. But then if you start breaking it up, you also find that sex crimes are way down, aggravated robberies are way down, drug crimes even are down. Homicide peaked in the early 1990s, and that's down as well, and then levelled off. That's because of a whole lot of other things that are happening, which and I think you can rely on those figures, because people tend to report robberies, aren't 100% unless they've been robbed of their drugs or something.
And Susan,
so you can rely on a lot of those figures.
And Susan, look, I receive correspondence all the time from public, and particularly in the last few weeks. And the one thing that comes through time and time again is people saying, we don't report crimes. What's the point? You know, we're not taken seriously. Now, if the police do not have the resources to be able to send a car and officers to investigate the crimes, then we're not going to have crimes reported.
All right,
burglaries have to be reported, John. Burglaries have to be reported.
But not if the excess is too high.
Because of insurance. So you can rely on burglary statistics.
Ron, Mark, 50-50 chance, really, overall, when you look at clearance rate, 50-50 chance of getting away with it when you lump all the figures together. Is that as good as we can hope for?
No, that is not acceptable. And it's not acceptable, and it will continue to remain that low whilst we have the poor resourcing that we have. When the police write papers such as this and tell the government where they're struggling, where they're having problems, and they do not get the resources they ask for, and we have the low ratio of police per capita that we have, which doesn't match up with Australia or other OECD countries, we will always suffer with this problem. The resolution rates are not acceptable at 50%.
Assistant Commissioner, you know, less than a 50-50 chance. They're good odds if you're a gambling man. Is it good enough? Can we hope for better?
I think that the results that have been announced today are a stunning result for New Zealand and for the New Zealand Police, notwithstanding everything else that's been said.
Greg Newbold,
we should celebrate that.
Greg Newbold, your view on it?
Well, it's relative to the type of crime. You know, you'd expect a high resolution rate with robbery and a low resolution rate with burglaries. Police can't spend all their time chasing burglars because they're bloody hard to catch.
Gentlemen, thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Well, up next, exotic animals. They make great pets, but there's some hidden dangers both for native species and us.
Try as you might, you'll never guess her age.
58. 55. I'm absolutely really quite hurt.
Wow.
It's quite upsetting.
Tell us how old you really are.
I'm 46.
Wow.
The most extreme makeover yet.
I'm going to be really horrible here to you for a minute. I have to be.
10 years younger. Friday on 1.